the Kennedy administration will begin to back the US dollar with real finite assets such as gold, silver, platinum, and Bitcoin.
What's going on, guys? So apparently the buffest presidential candidate is all about backing the dollar with gold and maybe even Bitcoin. Pretty strange, actually, and pretty ballsy. Speaking today, July the 19th, at a Heal the Divide PAC event. Heal the Divide, I'm guessing, between left and right. The controversial candidate said that he's willing, if he becomes president, he's willing to back currency dollar. Pretty funny to call the dollar hard currency given how inflation has basically wiped away 99% of its value. I don't see how that's hard currency. Regardless, let's hear his point.
To strengthen the US dollar and guarantee its continued success as the world reserve currency.
So basically, he argues that the US dollar, the hard currency, could see improvement in its value if it was backed by gold, platinum, silver, or even Bitcoin, and supposedly help to restabilize the economy. Of course, the Bitcoin maxis, the Bitcoin superfans would argue that this is a legitimization, a perfect scenario for the world. But is it really? Let's discuss. There's a couple of different angles you can take on this, and it's pretty strange that a presidential candidate would say that. Probably trying to lure in, obviously, the crypto crowd. And even if you don't like Bitcoin or crypto or any of that stuff, you gotta admit that this stuff is actually insanely popular. And sure, some people it's because they want to scam others and all that jazz. But if you look online or if you scroll through YouTube, you can actually see that there's a large thirst for an alternative because people are just sick of getting manipulated, essentially. The dollar, just like all the other currencies, are very manipulated. Anyways, Kennedy says that this process would be gradual, starting with like up to 1%. On top of that, he says that Bitcoin to US dollar conversions would be exempt from capital gains tax. Now that would be nice. But anyways, apparently Kennedy has had a pro-Bitcoin or crypto stance for a very long time, including as recently as Miami's Bitcoin conference this year, where he announced that he would accept political donations in Bitcoin. Apparently he has about $250,000 in Bitcoin, so that's pretty interesting. But if you take a different angle to Kennedy's proposal, what doesn't make any sense is that the US dollar, which is based off of credit, essentially, that's why inflation is so awful. Print, 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 print. Well, guess who uses all this money? The government. And they print it all away, right? So as it's printed, the value goes down, of course. But the predatory people, the predatory parasites, they basically manipulate any and all markets. They're the same people that would essentially do the same thing with Bitcoin or any other crypto. It would make no sense. It would legitimately make no sense. So you can't have the US dollar, which is already suffering pretty bad inflation, tagged to something like Bitcoin that can dump like 70% in one day. That would make no sense. Irrational up the wazoo. And for the gold backers, that would actually make more sense. And there's a reason why gold is referred to sound money, but it's not because of its intrinsic special qualities. Nearly all civilizations all across the globe have appreciated gold for its shiny qualities. But what makes sense with gold is that gold is accorded value because historically it has been sufficiently scarce to allow the purchasing power to remain relatively stable. Pegging the dollar to a precious commodity such as gold would limit the capacity of the government to print more money. So it would limit the capacity for the predatory parasites, the experts, to manipulate the currency if it was backed by gold. That's why ever since it was depegged from gold, the credit of the government has shot up. It was depegged, therefore they just print more. And of course, what does that do? More inflation. So money backed by a tangible hard asset like gold is harder to manipulate. It's the only reason why that makes sense. So the parasitic predators, i.e. the bankers and the government, of course, politicians, they need a lot of money to appease, those on this side and those on that side. But in the end, they hate gold-backed money because it's hard to manipulate. You can't just print money out of thin air. You can't inflate debt away. So you can't print more money just to pay off the interest. And of course, if you're the one doing the printing, well, guess what? You're the one in control. You are a master of control. So that's why people basically support gold-backed money. But in modern times, that's all wishful thinking. Credit, baby. That's all what this world is about. Credit, credit, credit. Print more money. Anyways, there's also another problem with Kennedy's proposal. You can't you can't back the dollar with either gold or any kind of Bitcoin because there's a $33 trillion debt. How the hell is that currency going to be backed by gold? That makes no sense. There have to be a new currency that's not like basically in the hole, in the water, underground. So back a currency with Bitcoin? No. It's not going to work. You can't store wealth. You can't have purchasing power on something that can crater, bottom out at 30% to 70% in a week, in a month, in a day. It doesn't make sense. And obviously gold doesn't work either because, well, too much debt. And also there's not enough gold to go around. I highly doubt the US has $33+ trillion in gold just to pay off the debt. But on the plus side for gold, it doesn't have the volatility like, of course, they would have to steal a lot more gold from those Russian oligarchs, you know? It's the only way to do it. So is Kennedy crazy? Because if that were to be the case, if something like that were to happen, potentially could bring a major disaster beyond our imagination. But on the other hand, who knows? It could be euphoric. We can all have peace and prosperity. You never know. The BRICS countries are supposedly building a new currency that is backed by gold or silver. You never know, but it is a new currency. It's not a currency in 30+ trillion in debt. So there is that. I do agree with him on peace and prosperity for all. I'll put the whole thing up so that you guys can see it if you want to. I'll put the full video at the end if you want to check it out, and I'll put a link below. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. Smash like if you haven't. Please do subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you so much for having me, and welcome to all the people who have joined this from the Bitcoin community who have joined this this Zoom call. Bitcoin 2023, I mentioned a number of commitments that I was making to the Bitcoin community. My uncle, President Kennedy, when he was in office, understood the importance of hard currency and the importance and the dangers of having pure fiat currency with no other option. He created silver certificates. He created gold certificates. They were laid after his death. Those were discontinued. But he understood the relationship between fiat currency and war, fiat currency and environmental, large-scale, very, very destructive environmental projects, and also these giant aggregations of wealth and the unbalance of the disparities in wealth that are ultimately the ultimate yield of every fiat currency, and then also the threat to America from the inflation, and ultimately the destruction of the dollar as the global currency. And Bitcoin is part of the basket of hard currencies that I think that the Kennedy administration is going to encourage the proliferation of and the propagation of. And I mentioned many reforms that I'm committed to in my Bitcoin 2023 speech, including self-custody. Your wallet should be your own. The capacity of people to run, of American citizens, others to run Bitcoin, or to run nodes inside their own homes. The policy of industry neutral regulation of energy, and my administration's mission of making America the global hub of cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin, as a means of incentivizing greater investment in green and energy and renewable energy production, and attracting engineering, investment, and innovation to our country. I will clarify some kind of sensible, and I need to think more about this and meet with many of you, but some kind of sensible jurisdiction and governance that recognize that Bitcoin is not a security and should not be regulated as one. And then also to put an end to the current policies of the Biden administration that are embodied by Choke Point 2.0, to punish banks for dealing in Bitcoin, and also to make strong barriers against the issuance of central bank digital currencies. I want to talk today about two additional reforms that we've given a lot of thought to and are going to be part of our package. Like Singapore, Germany, Switzerland, Puerto Rico, and Portugal, the Kennedy administration will exempt the conversion of Bitcoin to the US dollar from capital gains taxes. And there are downsides to this policy that we have considered carefully, including, and I want to be explicit about this, that this kind of policy will do something that is inconsistent with many of the other policy objectives of my administration, which will give a windfall to some of the investors or the early investors in Bitcoin, many of whom have a great deal of money and don't need a windfall. But the benefits of this policy, I think, are so great to our country that they dwarf the disadvantages of that outcome. The benefits include facilitating innovation and spurring investment, ensuring citizen privacy, incentivizing ventures to grow their business and tech jobs in the United States rather than in Singapore, Switzerland, Germany, and Portugal. And today, and to make non-taxable, one of the provisos is that, or one of the factors in this decision is that non-taxable events are unreportable. And that means it will be more difficult for governments to weaponize currency against free speech, which, as many of you know, is one of my principal objectives, and other civil liberties, as occurred in Canada during under the Trudeau government during the COVID administration. One of the historical factors that we looked at was what happened when the Clinton administration took the very controversial policy of exempting e-commerce from taxes. And people said, well, that's going to benefit certain wealthy people and certain classes of individuals. But what really happened is it attracted engineers to the United States. Companies like eBay, like PayPal, like Amazon, which remained in the United States and headquartered in our country. And we attracted engineering talent from all over the world to grow that industry. And Silicon Valley is largely a result of that policy. So that policy stayed in place for 10 years. And as I said, it was very controversial in the beginning, but the outcome of that policy was really important. And this is almost exempting Bitcoin from exchange taxes is almost a perfect analogy for that, and we ought to be doing that in the United States. Secondly, the Kennedy administration will begin to back the US dollar with real finite assets such as gold, silver, platinum, and Bitcoin, which is the world's hardest liquid asset, to strengthen the US dollar and guarantee its continued success as the world reserve currency. This will include US Treasury bills, notes, and bonds. My plan would be to start very, very small. Perhaps 1% of issued T-bills would be backed by hard currency, by gold, silver, platinum, or Bitcoin. And then, depending on the outcome, we would increase that annually. And what this will do is it will ironically, we will be able to use Bitcoin to help save the US dollar. I was in Cleveland 10 days ago in the Lee Harbor district of Cleveland, which is one of the poorest districts in Cleveland. I got absolutely the business in that district. It's almost all African-American. We're almost completely wiped out by the COVID epidemic. There are a few remaining businesses, and they are now being wiped out, not by inflation. Of course, everybody, the poor, are being decimated by inflation in this country, and people on fixed incomes. And Bitcoin would be a hedge against that. but they're being wiped out now by high interest rates, which is the remedy, the government's remedy, the Fed's remedy for inflation. The high interest rates have devalued the value of T-bills, which are and so many of the local and community banks that serve those communities are now hoarding their liquid assets. They're hoarding their T-bills and they're not making loans. And I met with an African-American woman who had one of the few surviving businesses in that community. It's a sausage business that had been in her family for 80 years. And she's closing it now because she cannot get a small loan, even a small loan, from a local bank. They're simply unavailable because the banks are not putting any liquidity into those communities. And we need to change that. And one of the ways to change that is to strengthen the perception and the value of T-bills so that they do not degrade like that. And this is a way of doing that. So those are the two announcements I'm going to make for today.